Anyway, guys, the Jew-hating murder of innocents on Bondi Beach shocked no one who was paying attention. Jews knew it was coming, politicians knew too, but they buried the truth for votes, terrified of that particular bloc that delivers those votes. Anti-Semitism isn't new. It has raged on for 2,000 years. Anyone who knows any history will know this. It peaked in a world war that scarred humanity. We thought we'd moved on. We were wrong, and we are sliding back faster than you can imagine. The chaos on streets across Europe and the West echoes Kristallnacht, and if you don't know what that is, guys, go and look it up. Vandalism, hatred, unchecked rage. Week after week, crowds from young to old march, chanting from the river to the sea, globalise the Intifada. You let this poison sleep into empty minds. You tolerate racism in broad daylight. Don't tell me it's just about Israel's government, not Jews. That's the smokescreen for bigotry and racism. When you scream for global intifada, you are endorsing Bondi Beach stabbings, Heaton Park attacks, gunning down Israeli staffers in the States, shooting Jewish academics at MIT. The mass slaughter of men, women and babies simply because they were Jewish. My heart shatters for my Jewish friends, worshipping behind barricades, dropping their kids at nurseries under guard, dreading what's next. And believe me, they are dreading it. When a society abandons its Jews, it forfeits its soul. We've lost our soul as Islamification surges unchecked in the West.
We're living in a time of what feels like pretty significant social change, and it makes us question things that we've even taken for granted for decades. And one of those at the moment that people are wondering about is actually money. Is the money in your bank account safe? Should you be investing elsewhere? Are we looking at a potential global crash? What will it mean for your savings? Is there a way that you could be using your money that might be outside of government control even? Well, TallyMoney is potentially one solution. So I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by the CEO and founder of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. What is TallyMoney?
Well, at TallyMoney, you basically get gold you can spend. So we give people an individual account in their name, everyday account. They get a sort code, an account number. They use that account just like they would pounds from their bank, but it's milligrams of gold that we brand as Tally.
Okay. Why would you do that, though? What is the benefit to the customer instead of just having a normal pound sterling account?
Gold's performance against the pound is above 11% per annum over the last 25 years on average. But we still need money in our daily lives, and we have savings. We know that it's good common sense and prudent to save up for things, not just live in credit. You know, whether it's a holiday or a rainy day, your retirement planning, you need to have money in your life, basically, that you can rely on, that's dependable, that nobody meddles with, that nobody can weaponize against you, which is another element of government control when it's the government currency, which we could talk about another time. And it should be pretty simple and straightforward, and that's what we deliver at Tally. And really, we just want people to feel safe and happy with their money. There was a time when the bigger your bank balance, the more confident you felt. Now it's like, I need to do something with it. I can't leave it there. In Tally, you can.
Okay, brilliant. Cameron Parry from TallyMoney, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bev.
Yeah, it's been a shocking few weeks, hasn't it, for the Jewish community? And Will, obviously, you're from Australia, so I'd like to get your opinions on this and how this has affected the Australian community in general.
Yeah, Australia is hurting at the moment, Alex. The Jewish community is hurting, and Australia more generally is hurting. I live 5 minutes from Bondi Beach before I moved to the United Kingdom. There's a particular emotional resonance when something like this happens somewhere that you know so well, as our viewers in Manchester would be well aware. There hasn't been one tragedy this week, though. There's been two tragedies. There was the attack itself, and then there has been the response to the attack from the government of Australia and the New South Wales government. it continues a cycle of denial. Instead of actually having difficult conversations around immigration, multiculturalism and Islam, they've gone for the low-hanging fruit of gun reform when Australia already has the toughest gun laws in the world. They will crack down on free speech on the internet. They will say there are certain terms that you're not allowed to say, and yet this is all a smokescreen because it is politically convenient to do so, and it's much harder to tackle those questions that I mentioned. That's the real tragedy.
This is the thing, Benjamin, isn't it? Because tackling this issue with gun reform is like saying, OK, we're going to stop people from driving because people are ramming into people in Christmas markets. It's trying to solve the wrong problem, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in Birmingham recently, they put up bollards to stop dangerous vehicles, but there's no such thing as dangerous vehicles, there's dangerous people. Now, Australia, as far as I'm aware, these people had acquired their guns legally, and so clearly there's a limit. Some people have guns legally. I don't think that should be a very easy thing to get. But the problem is that there has been a hate speech that has been allowed to spread. What should not surprise us in many ways that the atrocity happened on Bondi Beach, because if I'm not mistaken, one of these men was seen at the October 8th protests outside the Sydney Opera House in which they were calling to globalise the Intifada. The fact that in this country only the Manchester Police Force and the Met Police Force in London have said that that will be an arrestable offence, but the rest of them refuse to say it, shows that we are being weak to this. Now, I have been to every country in the Middle East. First of all, you'd be surprised at how many ordinary people in those countries like Lebanon and Syria would gladly take the Israeli way of life over the terrorists that rule over them.
Totally.
But secondly, if you go to Saudi Arabia or UAE, you would not be allowed to say any of these things they say at protests in this country or Australia. How did it happen that I know people who work for the British Embassy in the UAE and the locals say to them, we don't want to send our kids to London because they might get radicalised?
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? Trey, we have a radicalisation problem. I think Australia was building. That was a moment that was going to happen somewhere in the West. It was building. FBI announced that they arrested 5 pro-Palestine activists who were plotting terror attacks. That was an announcement they made last week. We've got a problem, I think, in this issue of radicalisation due to the cause of Palestine. I think that is a mask for deeper, more heinous crimes to take place because some people are then radicalised by the groups within it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true. I almost don't even see those people necessarily as Islamic necessarily. I think it's just absolute Jew hatred. I think you're right. But we can't forget, though, the actual Muslim hero that I think did act on Muslim principles, actually put his life on the line to save Jewish people and others. Ahmed I don't see those people who are shooting innocent people, including a little girl, as Islamic. I just think they're as simple as that.
Where do you think that Jew hatred comes from, though, Trey?
I mean,
how can you disconnect this from Islam?
You can't. Well, I mean, if you look at the history of Jew hatred, a lot of that was actually European-based. I just think it comes from this blaming of Jews for everything wrong that goes in the world. But there's precedent for blaming of other people.
Which is racism.
After 9/11, some Muslims were killed. We've seen it in the Second World War with the internment of the Japanese. You saw it in the Norway attack with people who felt were overly pro-Islamic. I think you see it again and again as this kind of like collective responsibility of anyone that people think shares this group.
There is a particular...
It's not just Islam, though. You've seen it in Europe. Jews being scapegoated again and again.
But there is this cowardly gaslighting among some parts of the population that says this has nothing to do with Islam and nothing to do with religion, when it is obvious that there are parts of the Islamic community where there is a deep strain of anti-Semitism.
And that is the important bit, because it's not all Muslims, is it, at the end of the day? It is a radical group of Islamists. So I call them Islamists because they are radicalised people who have taken elements of the textures that have been written 1,000 years ago, what many would claim in those cases, and they still apply them to today. Benjamin, is that right?
I mean, yes, clearly, but actually it's broader than that, because it's not just the Islamists that exist. It is a thread among white middle-class British people who have failed to recognise the dangers of that. People that would share my politics in most other ways, and yet, they'd be furious at Jacob Rees-Mogg for his view on abortion, like I would, or gay marriage, but then if it was said by a woman in a headscarf or a Muslim man, they would suddenly omit to care about it. And that is a failure in our day and age, and I think there is a weakness to confront that. It's also also a matter of numbers. There are far more Muslims in this country than Jews. And so if you're going to solve this problem, you have to appeal to the Muslim community to see it from the other side. Otherwise, we'll be stuck.
But they're not stepping up, are they? Not in any big numbers. We're not. We saw just the Muslim Council of Britain, I think, put out a statement. We didn't see many statements from the music community.
There was, I think it's called the Global Council of Imams, an Australian imam, who put out a video where he absolutely condemned not just the attack, but the way the Western world has failed to stand up to it.
Yes.
And he said, as an imam, this makes me so angry because this is not why I'm in Islam.
On the day of this happened, it's important, I'll pass it over to you, Will, that we had a guest on my show, Fayaz Mughal, who's also a Muslim man standing up against anti-Semitism, and I asked him this question. He said, yes, he's disappointed that not more Muslims speak up about this, but there is a growing voice when more people like him say things like this as a Muslim man. There's a growing voice of people saying we are rejecting radical Islam, and people like the ones that live in the UAE and their government have been absolutely clear they do not want that in their country.
So
they're
why
doing a
aren't
better
we?
job than we are.
That's great.
Good question.
But I'm all for that. But I'm concerned that is just them getting better at PR. There is a huge problem around radical hate preachers in mosques along the outer regions of Sydney and Melbourne, where you will see, you'll have the leadership of the leader of a particular Islamic lobby come out and say the right things, but the people who are actually preaching on a day-to-day basis are saying some of the most spiteful, hateful stuff.
I think
and you need to actually address that.
I think the Benjamins really got the nail on the head. I think you've got to engage the Muslim community. I think when they see it as an attack on Islam in general, you're not going to get anywhere. But when people can see, listen, a lot of these people that are doing that, they're not following any of the teachers in the Quran. It doesn't ever say shoot and kill innocent people.
You can interpret the Quran that way. You absolutely can.
They've got a very warped interpretation. The same way the KKK had a very warped interpretation of Christianity.
I guess the elephant in the room is that we had 750 young Muslim men come over today. We don't know how radicalised they are before they arrive here, before they're allowed to roam around in society rather than going to a locked detention camp. That is a massive problem, and it's part of the problem. You might not want to admit it, Trey. It's part of the problem.
And people will try and say, well, it's because of Israel's actions. Now, some of Israel's actions weren't great, were unacceptable, but in general, they were trying to defend themselves from terrorists. And I met the former Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid, the leader of the opposition, a couple of weeks ago at a dinner. And he said, well, look, we might have lost the PR war, but if you live in Israel and you have these people trying to kill you that surround you, then we care rather more about winning the actual war than the publicity one around the world. And just to say one other thing, when there was the Holocaust in Europe, Israel didn't exist.
That's true.
So it's not an excuse to say that it's the Israeli government.
All I know on that topic is if someone had done that to Britain, that level of terrorism in Britain, we would be calling for a war with them and we wouldn't stop until we crushed them. That's all I know here in the UK as a British person. Right, coming up next.